Welcome back to Retro Console Mining News. This is sort of a special holiday episode. We've got some cool stuff to talk about, like the GameCube component cables, some gbaHD updates, and Analogue Pocket issues. First up, let's talk about the new RetroTink 5X Pro firmware update. The main improvement with this firmware update is that there is now an OSD that lets you navigate all the functions that were on the remote here are now available on an OSD. Mike Chi and Bob from RetroRGB did a live stream where they pretty much went over every feature of the new firmware. So go ahead and check out that video for a really detailed walkthrough of all the different firmware settings. But just quickly, I'll go over my favorite features from the new firmware. The first feature that I like are the input and output resolution menus, where you can just select the output and input resolution that you want instead of having to just cycle through all those resolutions. So that's a huge win for this firmware, and I think that makes using the 5X Pro way easier. My other favorite feature is the scaling and cropping menu that lets you basically, let's say you're playing a Sega Genesis or something and you've got like blue borders around the edges of some games. You can go into this cropping menu and crop the blue edges that are unimportant to the actual game out of the picture. Then you can actually scale what's left of that cropping to the top of the screen. So basically you're cutting out all the unnecessary things and filling the screen with the whole game. In Bob's video, they talked about how you can kind of easily maintain the aspect ratio with the scaling. So you can kind of go vertical as much as you want, and then you can change the width to maintain the 4:3 aspect ratio, and it shows you actually in the menu what the ratio is. So really cool update. Go check out Bob's video for more information about all the different features in this new firmware. Next, I'm going to quickly talk about this Twitter post from Sato Den. The text here is in Japanese, but if we translate it, it looks like this is a Game Boy Color Consolizer, which is really awesome. And it actually uses the shell of the Game Boy Color as like the top of it, and the bottom is 3D printed, but it still looks like it has a full-size HDMI port and a Super Nintendo controller port. I'm going to try to look for more information about this, because if this is a kit that's readily available, I think this is going to be really awesome. I know the Game Boy Advance Consolizer exists, but I like the look of this Game Boy Color Consolizer, and with the price of Game Boy Advances right now on eBay, it's just kind of ridiculous. So maybe if you've got the Game Boy EverDrive and the Game Boy Advance EverDrive, it might be cool to have a standalone Game Boy Color Consolizer instead of having to swap the cartridge between a Game Boy Advance and the Game Boy Color. Next, let's talk about the Sega Nomad PCB and screen and battery kind of combo here. I don't really know much about the Sega Nomad other than I think it's the handheld version of the Sega Genesis, so you could put Sega Genesis carts into a handheld screen. But this kit looks like a complete replacement PCB for the Sega Nomad. There are comparisons on the left and the right from the old PCB and the new one. Looks like it has redesigned components. It already has a pre-mounted LCD screen, and this big bar here in the middle is a LiPo battery. So it sounds like you can just replace the old PCB with this new one in a sort of plug and play fashion, so that's kind of interesting to upgrade your existing Sega Nomad. Like I said, I don't know much about the Nomad, but if you've got a damaged PCB and you already want to upgrade to an LCD screen and a rechargeable battery, this might be a really cool option. All right, let's move on to the big stories. The first big story is the RetroBit Prism HD component cable for the GameCube. That's kind of a mouthful, but this is basically using that GC Video project that both the normal HDMI RetroBit Prism as well as most of the other GameCube HDMI mods are using, but just outputs to a component cable. So if you've already got a component set up, maybe a component switcher, a bunch of HD Retrovision cables already, this seems like a pretty cool way to connect a GameCube to the rest of the setup. Now keep in mind that you do have to use a GameCube with a digital port, so model DOL001. It outputs up to 480p from an NTSC console, but you should be able to send that through a scaler like the RetroTink 5X Pro. So again, this is just a cool option for GameCube owners that want to integrate with a component-only setup already, but don't want to do any other mods. Next, we've got some updates from the gbaHD project, which is an open source Game Boy Advance Consolizer kit. It actually works with both a Game Boy Advance SP and a normal Game Boy Advance. ManCloud is working on a flex cable, so you don't have to solder all those little tiny wires to the Game Boy Advance when you're connecting to the gbaHD shield. I think this is a huge update to the gbaHD project. It saves you a bunch of time if you know how to solder flex cables, and it gives this project some more feature parity to the Game Boy Advance Consolizer. This is still a work in progress, so I'll tweet out when ManCloud has finalized this flex cable. Also, Zwenergy, who is the developer of the gbaHD project, has added a feature to the gbaHD firmware. Basically now you can toggle between a hard 60 Hz or 59.7 Hz frame rate from the OSD. And it looks like they fixed an audio bug too, so maybe I'll have to try this new firmware and see if it fixes any of my audio issues. They also enabled AR3v3, which if you go to my gbaHD Shield installation video, you'll notice that I had to solder a bridge on the bottom of the FPGA board. You no longer have to do that. ManCloud said that you don't have to remove that bridge if you've already got it, but now it makes it basically so that you don't need to add that bridge on the bottom of the board anymore. I'll try to update my gbaHD video with a note saying that you don't have to add that bridge anymore, but there's no such thing as annotations in YouTube anymore, so unfortunately that might get missed by some people. But thankfully it's not going to hurt anything if people actually add that bridge. And finally, let's talk about some Analogue Pocket issues. Now that people have gotten them in the mail, they've been using them for a little while, and it's not just, YouTube influencers trying to sell the thing or just tell people more about it. So far there's just 2 issues that have come up. The first one is, looks like there's some incompatibility with certain homebrew games. This Twitter user, RetroBit posted that he's tried a bunch of these games on the left here, and the ones on the right here didn't work. So just from this post alone, it's unclear if this is an issue with the actual cartridges or the Analogue Pocket. However, let me show you this tweet from Crix. Basically said that there's some compatibility problems with the Pocket. Long story short, it looks like there's some compatibility issues with certain versions of the EverDrive GB, specifically the X5 and the X7, and they say it doesn't affect every single cart either. So while I don't have a Pocket to test my Game Boy EverDrive, it seems like some people out there may have problems with theirs. Also, the important thing to note is Crix at the end writes, the real question is if it can be fixed by a software update on his side or the analog side, or if it needs a hardware revision to fix it. I guess we'll find out more about this issue in the future, but for right now, if you're having issues with your EverDrive, it's unclear about how that's going to be resolved. The second main thing is some people have experienced the cartridge slot being really loose. Actually, this is a video by Wolfden. It looks like their Pocket, it's very easy to knock around the cartridge. They even went on to say that they laid this game down on the table, and by just laying it down on the table, it caused the game to freeze. At this point, it's not clear if it's just their specific Pocket or if other Pocket users are experiencing the same thing. I think it's important for people to understand that it's possible that Pockets could just have loose cartridge slots. I think it's safe to say that most people would understand that there's probably going to be some issues with these Analogue Pockets, but the real unfortunate thing is the people that were influenced to buy a Pocket because they watched all of those videos praising it. I don't know, let me know your thoughts. Are these issues kind of bumming you out, or have you heard about other issues? Let me know in the comments below. That's it for this week. If you want to suggest a news story to me, follow me on Twitter or join the Discord. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.